Here we go. Oh, okay. So it is Friday, July 21st, and this is our policy and action webinar. So we are going to start out with some federal information. So we got word from the National Assembly of State Arts Agencies that the federal budget process is moving for fiscal year 24, which is interesting, right? Because we're in a different phase in our state for our fiscal year budget, our fiscal year 24 budget, which we'll get to in a moment. But the federal budget is moving slowly, and part of that process is about the appropriations committee and their subcommittees kind of putting together their budget. So here's what we know. The debt ceiling negotiations, if you recall from a couple of months ago, and the negotiations that Speaker McCarthy had to go through in order to become Speaker of the House are having real impact on the budget. So what we understand is that as part of the deal that was made in terms of the debt ceiling negotiations and Speaker McCarthy's election, is that there was a group that was pushing to return to basically 2018 spending limits for the government. And so right now, what the appropriations bill proposes is a reduction for the National Endowment of the Arts by 10%. So that would bring us from last year's total of about $207 million to $186.3 million. Why does this matter? It matters for a couple of reasons. One, there is money that the National Endowment for the Arts directly sends to our state arts agency, the Mass Cultural Council, that they distribute. So that money would go down. There are grant programs that many of our cultural organizations rely on in Massachusetts that would be reduced. Overall, the agency wouldn't be able to do the work that, the other work that it's doing in terms of convening and data collection, right? So this is obviously concerning. And for many of us who have been through cuts to the NEA in the past, you know that we will mount a strong campaign to make sure that our voices are heard. But here's the thing that's interesting right now, is that right now it's still sort of like sitting in one of the subcommittees. And so the call to action is actually for those folks who have representatives in those subcommittees, right? Their representatives from their states are in those subcommittees to reach out. And none of our congressional delegation is in that particular subcommittee that we need. So we in Massachusetts are in a little bit of a wait and see moment, right? So what I want to make sure you all know is I want to make sure you know that this is a heads up, that it may be necessary to have some advocacy to our congressional delegation. Now, we are lucky for the most part, our entire delegation is not I would say a enthusiastic supporter of the creative sector, but they are supporters of the creative sector. The one other problem is, right, is like in terms of the House, the Democrats are not in power in the House, and our entire delegation are Democrats, right, in the House. So that means that they don't quite have the power that they would have if they held the majority. So we will let you know as things develop, but this is a heads up that this might become something that we need to do a little bit more stronger advocacy on as we go forward. All right, so moving ahead to talk about the state budget. So here's my handy dandy little graph, and you can say we are here and we are still here. So basically in June, the fiscal year 24 budget went to the conference committee that's made up of members of both the House and the Senate, and they started negotiating the budget and negotiating basically the differences between the House version of the budget and the Senate version of the budget. And they have not stopped negotiating the differences. And so there was some hope last week when the House and Senate called for some formal sessions. They put some formal sessions on the schedule, that might be because the conference committee was returning and said, here's our negotiated version, let's pass it and send it to Governor Healy. But that didn't happen. So at the moment, we are sort of still in a wait and see. What that means is that just logistically, the state government is operating on a very sort of bare bones operating budget. Basically, the governor will continue to submit 1/12 budgets, which allows for sort of like the continued operating spending to happen. But like other big things that, we would expect to see happen aren't going to happen until that budget gets passed. So what do we think? Like where do we think that, what's the timing? Oh, sorry. So just a reminder, I just want to review the bidding here. So the House budget has 25,895,000 for the Mass Cultural Council budget. That's 25 million for grants and agency operations, and then 895,000 in earmarks for cultural organizations. And then the Senate just did a straight 25 million. So that's one of the things that they're negotiating, is what that actual line will be. So what comes next? And this is me being a little sarcastic here when I say not much. Obviously, a lot is happening behind the scenes. We just don't expect to see the budget kind of get passed from the legislature in July. And then traditionally, August is August recess. And so most of the legislators will be in district in August. And so we don't expect that there'll be any formal sessions in August that would allow for the passage of the budget. So what we think is going to happen is in the fall, right, starting in September, the committee will return and the legislature will pass their version, and then that'll go to the governor to either sign, to veto, or to do line item vetoes. And should the governor decide to do a line item veto that affects any of the lines that we care about as part of the creative sector, we'll mount an advocacy campaign to urge the legislature to override those vetoes. Again, if I'm trying to be a little bit of a fortune teller, I don't imagine that the governor would do a line item veto for the Mass Cultural Council or arts spending, because she's a pretty strong supporter of the arts and creative community. But just in case, that's another heads up. The other thing that's going to happen is that we're going to see a ton more hearings. Now, hearings have been happening little by little. And in fact, the Tourism, Arts, and Cultural Development Committee is having a hearing on a bill that we are not working on, but they are having one hearing. I think it's, Derek, I think you're on the call, if it's this week or maybe next week. But we will see even more hearings happening in the fall. And that matters to us, right? That matters to us as a creative community, because all 5 of the bills that make up the creative sector legislative agenda are going to get a hearing. So what are hearings and why do they matter? So as you may know, every bill that gets filed gets a hearing. This is part of the process, right? And it is, it's assigned to a committee, and then it receives a hearing. And those hearings are, as the slide says, they're an opportunity for the committee to hear from the public, right? From constituents, from advocacy groups, from businesses and organizations that bill would affect, from people that bill would affect. And you get a little bit of time to talk about why this matters to you. And then the committee will take all of those testimonies, that's what they're called, and they will review them, and they will make a decision on what to do with the bill based on that and based on other information that they have when they're considering it, right? Whether it's data, whether it's input from other state agencies, they'll use that information to make a decision. And what they can do is they can basically do a couple of things. They can report the bill out favorably, which is what you want. If you're supporting the bill, it means it's going to move to the next phase. They can send it to study, which is sort of the very kindest way of saying, no, we're not going to move your bill. Your bill's not going to move anymore this session. Or they can report it negatively, and then that bill does not go anywhere either. So we are going to be really focused on making sure that all 5 of the bills that we're advocating for get the amount of support and sort of necessary a testimony that they need for those hearings. And we're hoping you'll join us. So we've already stood up on our website a couple of different pages where you can endorse bills, formally endorse our bills. And if you do that, we'll know that you care particularly about one of the 5 bills. And when it comes time for a hearing, we will let you know. We'll let you know how you can sign up to testify in person, or if you're not able to, how you can write written testimony to submit. We'll give you some talking points that you can use to develop your testimony. And we'll ask you to continue to reach out to your elected officials about the bill. And so the other thing to know is, right, is like one of the goals here, one of the strategies here is to make sure that the legislators, especially the committee, knows that there's a lot of support for this bill. And again, constituent support is incredibly important, and that's what all that testimony would be. The other one is colleague support, right? So the other thing that we can use your help on right now is making sure that your legislators have endorsed all of the bills or the bill that you care most about. And you can just drop them a line and just let them know why you care about this bill. We do have on our website a form email that you can send to say, you know, I encourage you to co-sponsor all of these bills. But you can also drop a personalized note and say, you know, the Place Act is really meaningful for our community. Here's what we've seen public art do already. This is why we want to see more of it, not only in our community and across the Commonwealth. And legislators have until the bill is reported out of committee to co-sponsor that bill. So we're going to continue to push and urge you and urge legislators to co-sponsor those bills, you know, all the way up and through those hearing dates. Okay. So just real quick, I sort of talked about this already, but you get just about 2 to 3 minutes to speak in support of the bill. And then the best stories and the best sort of testimony is really anchored in your experience or your organization's experience, right? You know, data absolutely is key, but the more stories we can collect around the positive impact these bills will have, the better. And so that's the other thing we're going to be looking for from endorsers moving forward. Okay, so here are the bills, just to remind you. So there's the creative space bill that would be about making sure that there's more creative space preserved and created in communities. The cultural equity and tourism promotion, we had a press conference around that bill 2 weeks ago in Chicopee, which Kelsey will tell you a little bit more about. The Act to Improving Accessibility in the Creative Economy, or the ACE Act, which is about getting more money to cultural organizations and creative businesses so that they can implement the recommendations to make their spaces more accessible and more inclusive. The Place Act, which is the public art bill, and then the Downtown Vitality bill, which if you were on our, I think it was our May call, we heard from the folks over at the Gateway Institute about why, how this bill would help provide a grant funds to Main Street associations, business improvement districts, and cultural districts to support their operations to make sure that they can bring people to downtown spaces in person. So I'm going to take a pause. I'm going to stop sharing for just a second. Yeah, did I stop sharing? And I'm just going to check to see if folks have questions. I'm looking through the chat. All right. Just real quick, does anyone have any questions about what I went over before we move on? No? Okay. All right, so I am going to start to share again and turn it over to Kelsey. One moment. Okay, Kelsey.
Cool. Thanks, Emily. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you here. I'll be brief in my updates about the press conferences, but as Emily mentioned, we are organizing individual press conferences on each of our priority bills and trying to be really intentional about getting into as many communities throughout the Commonwealth as we can with these press conferences so that as many people as possible have opportunities to engage with us in person and in this work. Last week, we had the first one on the Cultural Equity and Tourism Bill that was held at the Polish Center of Discovery and Learning in Chicopee. The lead sponsors on that bill are Senator Jake Oliveira and Representative Pat Duffy, and it was great. The room was packed. We were able to get this story and this work into multiple media outlets. We have a page on our website that has collected all of them, so you can read the full press release, see Emily on WWLP. She was fabulous on it, so definitely check out that clip, and then read the other articles as well. So I'll share the link for that recap in the chat, and in the recap, you'll also notice that there's still opportunities to get involved by having your organization endorse the bill. And then following up with us if maybe you are an individual artist or a creative and want to support it and want to learn more about how to testify when we eventually have a hearing on the bill and how to submit written testimony. So that was just the first press conference. We have another one coming up next Friday at 2:30 p.m. at Community Access to the Arts in Great Barrington. So for my Western Mass folks on the call, we encourage you to attend. I'll also note that all of these press conferences are open to the public. So if you are able to, and if you have the time, please do come out and talk with us more about this work. The ACE Act is the Accessibility and the Creative Economy Bill, so it would stand up a grant fund so that cultural organizations have more resources to make sure that their programs and their venues are ADA compliant. So we're very excited about this. Community Access to the Arts is very excited about this, and we hope that you join us next Friday. The two other bills, we will work separately with Mass Inc. to stand up some more public advocacy around the Downtown Vitality Act, but for the time being, the Creative Space Preservation press conference will likely be in early September in Boston. So we will provide more information once we finalize all the details there. And the public art bill will be held on Friday, September 15th in Worcester. And again, we will send out more information about the time, the location, and where to register. So that's about it for the press conferences, but does anyone have any questions before I put those links in the chat? Great, thank you.
Thank you, Kelsey. So that's kind of it right now. So we will see you in September. Obviously, you can continue to count on Mass Creative to share via email and our social media platforms any sort of late breaking news around any of the policy work that we're doing and the advocacy work that we're doing. But because the legislature is largely going to be in recess in August, we're going to take a pause on our policy and action webinars as well as our open house. Virtual open house that we hold the first Friday of the month. But we are still working. And if you need anything, if you have a question, if something happens, you are more than welcome to email any of us to let us know and so that we can help you out. But I do wish you all a good rest of your summer. I hope you get outside. I hope it stops raining for a minute and we get to enjoy a little bit more vitamin D. And again, if there's anything we can do, we are here. So thanks so much and have a good weekend.